On another exciting episode of the Animation Deliberation podcast, we have double the episodes, double the Star Wars storytelling, and the same amount of ads. We're going to get to all of that and much more right after these ads we have no control over.
Sing along if you know the words. Double your pleasure, double your fun. Sorry, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Animation, deliberation, a conversation, and a celebration of our favorite action animated series. Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of Animation Deliberation, the podcast where we take action animation and cartoon seriously, but not too seriously. We are your hosts. I am Zuhair Ali.
My name is J. Scotty St. Clair.
And I am Andrew Rogers.
There is another song that crossed my mind when I was watching the episode. There was one point when there was like, and this is something worth fighting for. And in my head, it's like, a clone worth fighting for. So, while we're throwing in the extra songs, I had to get that one out there.
Yeah. Nice.
But as we said at the top, we unexpectedly got 2 episodes of Bad Batch. We're not complaining. Let's get to these synopses and let's talk about it. We're excited.
Indeed. I just kind of say real quickly, I'll be curious to see what the reason that they did these 2 episodes. I don't know if they're trying to like move up the schedule to make room for all the things that are coming down the pike, like Mandalorian Season 3, Star Wars Celebration, the Jedi Survivor game, or if it's just the fact that these episodes kind of work in tandem as well as they did. I'll be curious to see what the future holds. But
yeah, because we didn't hear anything beforehand where it's like things like Last of Us were like, hey, we're pushing this episode so it doesn't conflict with the Super Bowl. So it's like, we didn't quite get anything that specifies like why they're doing it. It's just surprise.
Right. Yeah. So pleasant surprise, but yeah, surprise nonetheless. So, all right. Season 2, Episode 7, The Clone Conspiracy. In the Imperial Senate, Rampart pushes for the passing of a bill authorizing the military recruitment of Imperial citizens, meaning that clones will be officially discarded. Senator Ryo Chuchi, or Chichi, as it sounded like it was pronounced to me during the episode, who defends the clones' fundamental rights, is approached by clone trooper Slip, whose friend Cade was murdered on Rampart's orders when he defied the official version of Kamino's destruction by a storm disaster. Chi-Chi begins to investigate Rampart's conspiracy, alerting the Admiral. The Admiral, not Admiral, he's not Admiral at all, who sends an assassin after Slip. Just as Chi-Chi tries to convince Slip to testify, the assassin kills him. Before Chi-Chi can suffer the same fate, she is rescued by Rex, whom Slip has summoned for help. The assassin, a clone, kills himself as he is questioned.
And then leading into our second episode of this double feature, Truth and Consequences. Rex contacts the Bad Batch and asks them to join him, and Chuchi, who tells them about Rampart's plot. To provide evidence against him, Rex asks the Batch to retrieve Slip's copy of Rampart's command log from his Venator?
Venator, yeah.
I thought there was another N in there, like Venator? No. It's a Doofenshmirtz line at that point. Venator class Star Destroyer, which is undergoing planet-side maintenance. While Omega accompanies Chuchi, who tries to get support from more senators, Rex and the rest of the Batch sneak aboard the cruiser to retrieve the data, but trigger an alarm and barely escape. The next morning, Chuchi accuses Rampart before the Senate, and with the data in her hands, Rampart is arrested. However, Emperor Palpatine personally orders the Imperial recruitment bill to be passed, proving that with his goal all along. Before the Batch leave Coruscant, Echo decides to stay with Rex and Chuchi to help fighting for clones' rights.
A new Imperial Stormtrooper. Oh man, his delivery on those lines is so good. I want to knock out the technical stuff real quick.
Okay.
We're suckers for good lighting on this. As usual, it was incredible. I was watching with like my hue lights synced up, so the whole room was like changing colors. Like with the scene, it's just so beautiful.
Ooh.
I also don't know how people like just watch these episodes on their laptop because like the sound design is just so incredible, especially when you have surround sound. You can just hear it like. It's so good. It gives me chills. But the new thing on this that I really appreciate is kind of like one of the big things of Rogue One, and that was kind of like how they show scale and seeing the Bad Batch like running across the ship and actually having those like dramatic zoom out of the camera angles and like seeing these tiny people like going across. I was very, very impressed with that.
Yeah, every time we get people with a Star Destroyer, I realize I forget how big they are, because you're just like, oh yeah, it's kind of like a decent sized ship, and you're like, no, you could probably fit thousands of people on one of those things and have room to spare.
Yeah. Well, I guess while we're speaking on the more technical aspects of the show, I just kind of want to get it right out of the way. The end of the first episode, that score, Kevin Kliner's score again, like really, really resonated with that. The end of that first episode, that like really stuck out to me.
That, and I mean the Senate music. Whenever they have to, draw you in during any of those Senate scenes, I am fully engrossed in whatever political drama is going on.
Yeah.
But we talk about
that's the stuff we've been itching for too.
Oh yeah, you're gonna hear me gush about that for sure. Don't you worry.
But the beginning of episode 7 really reminded me of the beginning of Attack of the Clones, music-wise. Actually, the total vibe-wise, because it's an assassin going on a meeting that no one's familiar with, and it's just the intensity of that. I was like, oh, I love this.
Yeah, I felt that too. Another happy landing.
Yeah, but I mean, and you talk about technical things. Gotta give Ian McDiarmid the credit that, only he can be Emperor Palpatine truly and confidently, because I wasn't sure who we were going to get, because I know during the Clone Wars they had a couple different actors come in and try and play Palpatine, but to hear that rich, earthy voice, I chills, just immediate chills down the spine, as I was terrified for whatever was about to happen.
Yeah, he reprised the voice for his role in Rebels, so I wasn't too surprised that they were able to pull him back for this.
Yeah, that whole reveal, Rampart's plan, we're kind of getting into plot now, but yeah, his plan being like foiled right before his very eyes, and him being used as a pawn, and then having the Emperor just rise before the Senate after he was called out before for not being present for a lot of these proceedings, was definitely the highlight for me.
You rang.
Something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely felt the connection to the prequels pretty strongly as well. I think the prequels really tried to, showcase the political side of things a little bit more, sometimes more successfully than other times. But yeah, I felt like this was kind of like retroactively addressing a lot of what we got with the prequels, with the clone army and that whole situation. It's like, how do we really make this transition from the prequels to what we saw in the original trilogy? And in that sense, I thought it was great storytelling and great world building there. That first episode did feel a little bit like almost like a pilot to me. It didn't really feel like an episode of Bad Batch at first, because we weren't spending any time with any recognizable characters other than ones we had seen in the background in the prequels, or Rampart obviously having showed up in the show beforehand. But it almost kind of felt like I've been watching Game of Thrones, so it was kind of like fresh in my mind, but just the political intrigue and the manipulation there like felt very present for me.
It's funny that you think that this is or you said that this felt like a pilot episode, because we've been talking about how the other episodes have felt like filler episodes. Like there was one episode that all of us agreed was good, and then last week's episode where you were on the lower side, I was up and about it, and Andrew was like right in the middle. So it's kind of like, if this is everything that we love about the Bad Batch, that kind of was the pilot to kind of kick off the stuff that we've been asking for.
True.
Yeah, because I was really worried after that first episode, because this is one of my favorite episodes that was one of my favorite episodes of the season. I'm like, wow, the episode that didn't have the Bad Batch was the best episode of the Bad Batch. I was happy to see them bring it full circle, and I loved the second episode just as much as the first. And it wasn't just that the Bad Batch was missing, it was that they just needed to tell a different story to get me on board, Bad Batch or otherwise. So I like that they managed to bring it all together, because I was very, very worried that it was like, wow, pilot to a story that we're only going to slightly care about. No, they actually made it, all come together really well. And yeah, I mean, this is very close to what a lot of Star Wars The Clone Wars was, Jay Scotty. There's several episodes where it's like Padme is doing Senate things and tracking down people on the side streets of Coruscant, and then Bail Organa shows up and teaches her different things. So like you just subbed out Padme for Rio here, and it worked the exact same way. But I loved getting into that deep nitty gritty of like, well, there's bribes going on. You got to track the trail of money and figure out how you're actually going to do these political steps. And then it may have also felt a lot like Clone Wars to me, because we actually have seen the Senator once before, way back, I think in like the first or second season of the Clone Wars. She was like a one-off character, but as soon as she popped back on screen, I was like, wait, I know you.
Yeah. Yeah, on the flip end of that, so it's like we've seen the Camino Senator as well, because she was like really tight with the banking clan, trying to get them to like spend. It was always like there was always like, so what do we want to do about the next batch of clones? And she'd always be the one like always pushing the agenda, right? Because obviously she wants the Republic to spend money on them. But we got like a little recap of Echo talking to Omega, and Echo was a big part of Clone Wars. Like, the Bad Batch were only in 4 episodes in the last season, but Echo was part of Rex's crew. So that the weight of that, and especially towards the end of the episode when he said bye, and he was like, I have to stay with Rex, and she's like, we're a squad, and I was like, technically they've been a squad a lot longer. Like,
yes.
Scoots, do you know the background of Echo? Like, why he's kind of the way he is?
I watched the episodes of the Clone Wars where they went on the rescue mission to retrieve him. So I know he was basically being used as like a human, like conduit to like enact some strategic manipulation of the clones. Yeah. So
yeah, which is why they needed the Bad Batch, because they work off the book. And I like that Rex mentioned that too. He was like, "Oh, I'm going off your plane, just gonna improvise."
Yeah.
So there was so much, like, all the good stuff about Clone Wars really bled into these 2 episodes, and I can't express enough how much I appreciated that.
Yeah, and I appreciated especially in that first episode, kind of like talking about the political intrigue, and like we were treated to like a nice little action set piece in the beginning when Slip made his escape, and it was very reminiscent of episode 2. But then after that, it was like kind of a slow build with a real sense of like, it was an ominous sense, and then we got that great sniper shootout sequence. And I have to admit, like, I was somewhere in the back of my mind, I was like, Crosshair, you showing up? He wasn't quite as accurate as Crosshair, so I was kind of glad that it wasn't him in that sense, because the continuity there. But then when he used like the electric cyanide pill, it was great to see that again, because I think the first time I saw that was in The Mandalorian. So to see that pop up again was like really cool.
I don't remember ever seeing electric cyanide, but that is interesting that they did that, because I was sitting there, I was like, all right, when you're gonna break your tooth, when's the foam gonna start coming? I was like, oh, upgrade.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's less intrusive or not. I mean, quicker death. But there was a couple times where it's like when Senator Chuchi met up with Organa, I was like, man, it'd be cool if Ahsoka's going to come around the corner. I don't think it's going to be her, though. And then towards the end, I was like, Rex is going to pop up. Okay, yes, it's Rex. And then when they took the helmet off, I was like, this isn't Boba Fett, is it? Is it like the early days of Boba Fett being a assassin? Like, budget bounty hunter? Because the age makes sense, because he doesn't have the speedy scaling. But then when they killed him off, I was like, darn it.
Yeah, honestly, that's a great question, and one of many characters I would love to see come back is a fledgling Boba Fett here, finally starting to get his things, because I know there's a deleted scene from the last season of Clone Wars wherein he like gets his armor back, so it's not canon, but maybe they find a way to weave it into this show of like, okay, he's got to go become a bounty hunter so we can bridge more of that gap between the seasons.
We still need like Boba Fett and Omega dialogue too, because their creation is so similar.
Well, you talk about Omega, and I feel like this is a great point to bring up. They did. I really appreciated it, as sad as it is, but the fact that they brought up the Kaminoans and that they were lost in all of this. It wasn't just clones. It was a whole, potentially almost entire race of people that were gone. And it hurts a whole lot more, but it reminded me that one of the scientists, I believe, escaped and is, out there. I think it was Nalase, if I remember correctly.
Did she escape, or was she like recruited?
I think it was a bit of both.
Yeah, I think it was like a recruitment, because you had like the main, I can't remember his name, but the guy that was in charge of Topeka City, and basically there was the Rampart had the dialogue of like, I need her, I don't need you. And then we saw the doors close, and it was like, they didn't explicitly say what happened, but it was pretty
He did.
Obviously broadcasted. Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So there is still that thread out there that, again, I brought it up last week. Oh yeah, Omega's a clone. What does that actually mean for the entire cloning process and what DNA they have left? And you have this scientist out there. There's still so many unanswered questions that this episode just kind of reminded me, hey, there is a story to tell in this grand scope of the rebellion going on and the clone downfall. And I love that we're finally getting them called stormtroopers, but I kind of like that I don't know if it felt like a joke to you guys, but it kind of felt like a joke to me that Palpatine was like, and we will have the Imperial Stormtrooper. And it's just this weird silence of everyone just kind of being like, what's a stormtrooper? Like, no one said anything. No one applauded. No one clapped. I was just like, are they all confused? Because I'd be confused.
Nah. Yeah. No, I definitely didn't have that moment because they were just talking about like the whole recruitment bill and whatnot. So I think it was just more of like branding reveal.
Okay.
It's like, intrigue. We have a name for it now. Because obviously like, everyone's still processing like what just went down and then that on top of it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you got a chuckle out of it.
A little bit.
I wanted to circle back to Omega a little bit because I did find myself like I was kind of waiting for someone to recognize that she was a clone or have more of like an extreme reaction when she revealed that she was a clone, particularly that Kaminoan. I can't recall her name, but she just kind
call
of
her the senator. Yeah,
there was like a look of like surprise a little bit when she revealed, like, oh, that's unexpected. But I also thought it was a little, I don't know, haphazard of Omega just to be like going around revealing that she was a clone, especially when they're doing such a covert operation. But I mean, I ultimately understand for the story as she was appealing to the clones as people and like they deserve rights and they deserve to have representation in the Senate. So it made sense in that regard. But I thought it was going to be a thread that potentially put her in harm's way or something to that effect. But yeah.
Well, I had the question, did her and Rampart never come face to face in the first season? Because he walked up to her in the hallway. I'm like, oh no, Rampart's going to know who she is, and then just didn't look at her. So I have to assume he never actually saw her, but I don't know how that happened because the whole plot point was like, oh, the girl's gone, or Omega's gone, rather.
Yeah. That's a good point. I remember having a similar thought that, oh, he's definitely going to recognize her, but I didn't really follow it up afterwards. But yeah, that's a great point.
I think it's kind of like the Clark Kent effect of like, why would you expect to see them like in plain sight in the Senate type of thing?
Sure.
Like she's just casually walking around with the senator. It's like, oh, her niece is in town.
Niece of a different species. Adopted.
I don't question galaxy far away intergalactic.
Fair enough.
I hate to say that we got this maybe once or twice last season, but I do like the episodes where Omega's not part of the combat because the Bad Batch just have this like chemistry that far exceeds potentially her birth. So just seeing that kind of like the seamless interaction is always super fun.
Yeah, I feel like they were much more in their element this episode going on that covert mission. Nothing really went wrong. Like anything that was a little bit of an issue, they said, okay, we'll improvise, as opposed to, oh no, someone screwed something up.
Sure.
Like it was a little closer to the Bad Batch we saw during Clone Wars, whereas I feel like they've almost been the butt of their own jokes during the TV show. As unfortunate as that is, I feel like they've gone a little bit more of the comedy route with the name show.
Yeah.
I could see that.
What did Tech say? He was like 0.6 meters off. Not his best.
And then Rex was like, oh, he's still not scared of heights. It's like, this is him doing better.
Yeah, sure.
I absolutely love that.
He's just Mr. T
just
in
as
the
simple
A-team.
as like, you just called the next person. What are we doing? This. No questions asked. All right, we're going to go do it. Which, was it last episode? Yeah, it was last episode where that's kind of what I was inferring with when Omega made the call to save Gungi,
Mm-hmm.
you brought up, it's like they just kind of went with it. I was like, yeah, that's part of like her growth and being part of their chemistry, but it's also, we don't question that as much with them because they just move on what they need to do. Whereas, like, I feel like when she does something, it's just like it's way out of left field, you know?
I think it's more often her actions put her out of her depth. I think that's a little closer to what it is like Tech is doing something because he knows it's a last resort. It feels like Omega's doing it just because she wants to.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think it's very close to what you said is, oh, she's growing, but she's still not quite there to realizing what risks need to be taken versus what risks she can take. And
yeah, she's doing
we'll see more of that.
She's doing it's easier to ask for forgiveness and permission.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just going to hope this works out.
I think that's a good point because I think that's part of the reason the Bad Batch is so protective of her. And, you know, despite the liability she might present, they want her to be a part of their quote unquote family because she is getting to have the childhood that they never really got to have. And like, there's something beautiful about that. So.
And their life has also always been follow orders.
Mm-hmm.
And she's kind of like the part of them that gets to think outside the box. And she kind of provides that moral and ethical compass that they've never really had to worry about having.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially being under the Republic for so long, they are your compass. They point you essentially as a weapon.
And we're seeing all the clones struggle with this now, which I'm loving this dialogue about this whole issue. And for those who've seen Rebels, like, we see what happens to the older clones and whatnot, but it's interesting seeing this point in time.
Well,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you talk about, you know, some of the clones pushing back. At the same time, we have this assassin clone and his, you know, dying line being something along the lines of, you know, I'm still a believer or something along those lines. Like, that was so interesting. Is, you know, is he under the influence of an inhibitor chip, or is he, you know, actually just like Crosshair and believes in what the system is giving? You know, there's so many layers to unpack there when it comes to what that clone is going to mean to the story.
Yeah, it seems the further removed we get from the inhibitor chips and Order 66, like the less impact that it has. We're really seeing these clones have more agency and make their own decisions and as a result be held accountable for those decisions. So I would defer to, he was more along the lines of a Crosshair, like he actually believed in the cause and was willing to die for the cause. So something that kind of came up, though, with the mention of Rebels and kind of knowing how this plays out by knowing the future, as much as I appreciate the story and love seeing it kind of fleshed out, I kind of had that thought too. It's like in the Obi-Wan series, we had spoilers for Obi-Wan, minor spoilers, but on the one planet you saw Tamara Morrison reprise his role as like that old clone on the side of the street begging for, you know, change. So it's like, as inspiring and hopeful we can be about this whole situation, we ultimately know that it's not going to go their way. So it's kind of tragic in that regard.
But then you have the flip where we have old Rex and Wolf, and they're just retired on one of their old Republic walkers, just on this random desolate planet, just living their best life, just walking and fishing, and just they're literally just old and fat with big beards and just like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the interesting dilemma of prequels. They're telling a very interesting story, but we know the direction that it's going to go, because I got very emotional with the Echo leaving the group and saying his goodbye to Omega and her being distraught about it. Like, I was tearing up. I'm not even gonna lie about that. But then I thought back and I'm like, I don't believe we will. So spoilers for Rebels here. It's kind of hard to talk without talking about the future, but we don't ever see the Bad Batch or Echo appear in any future property. So what happens between now and then is a very interesting story to tell.
Because they weren't written until afterwards.
Well, that's exactly it. They weren't written until after. So I don't want to. immediately think, okay, they're going to die or whatever the case may be. I want to see where this interesting story goes and where they end up leaving them. Are they going to have a happily ever after with Omega on a planet, or what's going to happen? Because we're getting into that weird, like, Ahsoka's back because she was written after the fact, so that's why we didn't see her during the actual rebellion.
Right.
So they have a lot of different ways that they can go with this, but I don't know what it is.
A big galaxy.
Yeah, it's a galaxy far, far away and very big.
Yes, indeed.
That is the fun thing about this, is knowing where the story ends, but seeing how we got there. Because there's a lot of in between. A lot.
Yeah, what's that old adage? It's not the destination, but the journey.
It's the journey.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the dope journey. It's the dope journey.
There's a reason that Star Wars is, referred to as a space opera, because it's pretty much a soap opera in space. You're just waiting for the character you thought was dead to come back out of nowhere, just like always,
I just call it an anime that started with live action.
Interesting.
There's a lot of layers there.
Yeah. I guess one of my final thoughts on this whole 2-episode arc situation, and I kind of alluded to it at the beginning, but I really felt like the beginning of the season was setting up Rampart to be our big bad, and maybe there's an opportunity for him to continue to show up and squirm his way out of this situation, or maybe we'll see him like absolutely desperate, kind of at his wit's end or whatnot. But it was surprising to me to have him like kind of taken off the board as the season's big bad. And I wonder who's going to replace him, if we're going to see that much more Palpatine, or who's going to kind of fill in that gap. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's another admiral that could be stepping into the picture soon.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with that.
Admiral Thrawn.
A feeling.
Yes. That would be
Guys,
interesting.
menacing is one of my favorite villains ever.
Nice.
I mean, there is a chance that Crosshair steps up. They could possibly be promoting him into some sort of role. And it feels too similar to other things that we've seen, but like he could make a hero turn and start helping the rebellion or something along those lines. I doubt it, but I agree.
He had that opportunity at the end of last season.
Yeah, it felt very, very open-ended on purpose. It was almost like, I know he's coming back, but I don't know how. But maybe that's just me being so used to those kinds of tropes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really do like Rampart, so I was kind of bummed that they, kind of took him out of the picture so quick. But did anybody else like find themselves like really get frustrated for the clones during that bar scene when they were like, "What do you mean pension? Like, I'd rather be fighting out there and this and that." Because like logistically, I'm like, sure, just let them fight until they can't, then let them train the recruits, and then let them be like leadership for the recruits, and then just let them die off. And it's just kind of like, the plan is simple. Why are you ruining their lives? They were made for this.
I felt sympathy for them, but kind of in a different direction. The fact that they didn't seem to have any value for themselves outside of fighting. It's like they've known no other life, and they can't even like see a future that doesn't involve that. That's where my sympathy kind of came in. It was like, yeah, they've just been.
We weren't trained for this scenario. What a line.
Yeah.
What a line.
Yeah. And honestly, it's also the terrifying, like, okay, we saw a clone in Obi-Wan. We didn't see a lot of clones in Obi-Wan, and we know how many there are still at this point at the end of the war, so...
Revenge of the Sith to Obi-Wan was 8 years?
Give or take.
Sure.
It's
hard.
hard.
I think it was like 8 for that, and then another 7 or 8 to get to New Hope from Obi-Wan. How old was Luke? 15?
Luke was
18. He was
18?
a little bit older than that. Yeah, I think he was
16,
close to
18, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it was like 10 and 8 years. So yeah, I mean, like we saw what happened to Rex, but with the accelerated growth and stuff, like, who knows what kind of shape they're in. I mean, like, we're fresh off Revenge of the Sith at this point. But, in regards to, like, that's what I like about It's the Journey, is that we're seeing these different timelines, and we're seeing, like, the gaps between events getting, like, narrower and narrower.
Yeah, it's also very hard to use any judgment of actor age, because I know that's kind of where you were going.
Sure.
It's like, oh wow, Tamara Morrison looked like he was a pretty old beat up clone, and it's like, well, he's aged because he was a different age than he was. It's in the same way of going from Ewan McGregor to Alec Guinness. It's like, wow, he looks a lot older for like 18 years in the desert.
That was a rough 5 years for you, wasn't it?
Hey,
Yeah.
There are 2 suns on Tatooine, okay? They take a toll.
Sunscreen can only go so far.
Yeah, what do you need? Like SPF? Whatever number you want to come up with.
You just need Star Wars metrics. You can't even use human numbers for it.
True.
There's too many zeros.
Yeah, it's
Very
not
true.
SPF, it's SWPF for Star Wars PF.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Obi-Wan didn't learn monoskin.
Ah.
Still on my block over high.
Okay.
Anime things bleeding into our Star Wars podcast.
Well, we do have Visions Season 2.
And all the anime that we cover.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some rumors that there's a possibility we get that on May the 4th, so you never know.
Woo!
I would be very excited about that.
Definitely.
As if we don't have enough to talk about.
What do you mean? Our schedule's totally fine.
I didn't cancel a whole other show to make sure I had enough time for this one. Obviously, it's my prime one, so yeah, it always comes first. But
Well, on that note,
good.
yeah, I think we're all kind of here at the end, so seems like a good time as any. We're talking about other anime. We have a whole other show to record tonight. If any of you are a fan of My Hero Academia, please keep up with that other coverage. And if not, check out the show, check out us and our thoughts to even see if you might be interested in the other episodes that we are doing.
Yeah, I won't be appearing on that episode, and those episodes tend to be the ones where we divulge into some of the other things we're watching a little bit more. So I will take a moment just to say I am current with Vox Machina Season 2 and still very much enjoying it, especially some of the guest voice actors that they have. Like, as a big Lord of the Rings fan, it was awesome having Billy Boyd, the Fool of a Took himself, pop up. So
I'm going to say a quick thing about Vox Machina that you guys might not like me for.
Uh-oh.
So I'm still watching Season 1.
Okay.
I've loved every episode that I've seen. Everything's great about it. But I don't have the dire urge to press next. If that makes sense. Like, with Black Clover, it was like, I'm not going to sleep ever. And with this one, it's going to be like, man, I really like that episode. I think I'm going to take a break now and go do something. And then, like, for the rest of the day, I probably won't watch another episode. Or I'll watch it the next day. It's like, I'll switch things up and put on an episode of Vox Machina. But it's not like that dire need to press it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I have not had that experience with the show. It's like having these episodes released in 3-episode batches. I watch all 3 in one sitting, typically, is how I've been doing, which is a little unusual for me. Like, normally I am like, I'll watch 1 or 2 episodes of something and then like take a break to do something else. But I'm just enjoying that much. But hey, different strokes for different folks. You still like it. It just, you got to ingest it at a different pace. That's okay.
Yeah, I feel like that bar is also very high for me personally these days to have something that I can just continue to hit play on, because like busy lifestyle this month, whereas you've been recovering. So like totally different points in time. But I mean,
so
I'm
does
kind
Vox
of
Machina give you that I need to press next, or?
I'm in the middle. Like when I'm watching the 3 episodes, I'm like, okay, I'm going to plow through all 3.
Okay.
But I'm not like, oh, it's Friday, I have to tune in. I'll wait until like Monday, Tuesday. Like it's whenever I get the free time. It's not like My Hero where I wake up and I'm like, okay, when can I watch this episode?
Yeah.
So it's a mix.
I was thinking about that with Vox Machina too, and I think Black Clover just kind of became my comfort show because I started it like the day that I got home from surgery. So it's kind of like living through their lives and being able to binge 4 seasons, where it's like, I know Vox Machina is only a season and starting the second. So it's like, I'm trying not to burn through it, but it's like, I got so invested in somebody else's animated life, which is kind of what anime has just been doing for me all my life. But I just got so invested with like their stories and stuff because like I had to hit pause on having a life because of surgery recovery. So I don't know if that has something to do with it, but in my free time, that's just been something I've been thinking about a lot.
Totally fair. Well, that is just a little bit of a taste of what you might hear on the My Hero Academia episodes. But yes, thank you all for listening. I will encourage you, like the show, share the show, rate and review the show. A 5-star review would be so very much appreciated. If you like what we're doing here, you got to let us know. You got to give us some love. That's right.
I saw you almost start.
Dude, I was so close. I was like,
go too deep in this if I start.
What's wrong with the world, Mama? We haven't got a review in so many months. All right. Okay. Yes,
if you get a review, I will sing it next week. There you go. There is the way that you get your words coming sing-song out of my mouth, is I will sing the next review.
We'll make the whole remix just for you.
Yeah, I like it. And whatever your review is, throw in a Black Eyed Peas like pun in the title somehow, so yeah, we know that you heard this. Anyway, social medias, where can they find us, Mr. Rogers?
Well, you can find me at any beautiful day in the neighborhood. Couldn't not with a setup like that, but you can find all of us on all of our social medias. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, Animation Deliberation, and Twitter at AnimationDelib1, a great place to catch up and keep track of all of our information, as well as share all of the content that we're doing and catch up with any memes that I happen to find funny that day of the week. So it's a great time.
To send you throughout the week.
Or any of the hosts will send me memes, and then I just put them on the story. It's a great way to catch up. That's all that it is, as well as you can find us on strandedpanda.com and the Stranded Panda Facebook chat.
Yep. Send us some feedback. Anything to plug as far as appearances on other shows? Nope, nothing? All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. That's TOONIN.
May the force be with you and stay round.
And Zuhair stole my bit, so until I come up with a better one, muscle.
Thank you for listening to the Animation Deliberation Podcast, a proud member of the Stranded Panda Network. If you would like to contact us, you can email animationdeliberationpodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at animationdelib1. For this and other great shows, you can visit strandedpanda.com or join the great community that is the Stranded Panda Chat Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/svchat. Tune in next time, and remember, stay whelmed.